The smell of Christmas was always the same in this house. It was the sharp scent of pine from the giant fir tree in the living room, its branches heavy with 2 decades of ornaments. It was the rich aroma of my mother's roasted turkey, the one she brined for 2 days using a recipe she never wrote down. It was the faint, lingering scent of my father's pipe tobacco, even though he hadn't smoked in years. For 23 years, this house had been my world. Its scent was the scent of home. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 31 years old. Tonight was supposed to be like every other Christmas. My brother, Julian, and his wife, Chloe, were here. My parents, Arthur and Margaret, sat at the heads of the dining room table, a king and queen in their familiar kingdom. The candles flickered, casting a warm glow on the polished wood. Everything looked perfect, like a postcard from a life I thought was mine. We had just finished the main course. My mother was about to offer dessert when Julian stood up. He was holding his wine glass, a self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. He had always loved an audience. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his voice loud in the quiet room. My father beamed at him. My mother looked at him with pure adoration. I just watched, a neutral observer, as always. Julian was the sun in our family's solar system. The rest of us were just planets caught in his orbit. He raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he announced. Chloe looked up at him, her hand resting on her stomach. I figured this was a pregnancy announcement. I prepared my face to show the right amount of surprise and happiness. But then Julian turned his eyes to me. The smile on his face tightened, turning into something cold, sharp, and practical. "Eleanor, I'm glad you're here for this. It makes it easier," he continued, his voice losing all its warmth. A knot of confusion formed in my stomach. Easier for what? He didn't wait. He took a small sip of wine, set the glass down with a deliberate click, and looked straight at me. His next words sliced through the festive air and landed like shards of ice in my heart. "Eleanor, this house isn't yours anymore. Pack your bags." The silence that followed was deafening. The candle flames seemed to freeze. I looked at my parents, expecting them to rush to my defense, to scold Julian for such a cruel, bizarre joke. But they didn't. My father, Arthur, cleared his throat and nodded slowly. "It's time, Eleanor," he said, not looking at me, but at his plate. My mother, Margaret, chimed in, her voice unnaturally bright. "It's just the practical thing to do. Honey, Julian and Chloe need the space." I stared at them. The 3 people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. My family. In a single coordinated blow, they had just told me I was homeless. The walls of the dining room, the very house I was sitting in, seemed to tilt. The smell of pine and turkey suddenly made me feel sick. My world wasn't just tilting. It was shattering. My first instinct was to say nothing, to just sit there and let the ringing in my ears subside. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. A poorly planned prank that they would all start laughing at any second. But their faces remained serious, set in a kind of grim resolve. They had practiced this. They had discussed it, planned it, and decided that Christmas dinner was the right time to detonate a bomb in the middle of my life. Julian leaned forward, his elbows on the table, taking on the role of the family spokesman. It was a role he cherished. "Look, Eleanor," he began, his voice laced with a patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years. "Let's be realistic. You're 31. You're single. You've been living here rent-free since you finished that little online course you did. Chloe and I are starting a family. We need this house. We'll put it to good use." Every word was a carefully chosen dart. Single, as if it were a disease. Rent-free, a lie, but a convenient one for them. That little online course he was talking about, my degree in cybersecurity, a field he knew nothing about. He made my entire education sound like a hobby I'd picked up on a rainy afternoon. His wife, Chloe, added her part, her voice soft but firm. "We need a nursery, Eleanor, and a playroom. This house is perfect for raising children. It's a family home." The implication was clear. I was not family. I was just an obstacle. I finally turned my gaze to my father. He had always been the quiet one, the one whose approval I had spent my life chasing. He avoided my eyes, focusing on rubbing his knee. "My knees aren't what they used to be, Eleanor," he mumbled. "All these stairs. It's a lot for your mother and me. Julian is more responsible. He can take care of the upkeep. It's a big house." Responsible. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Julian was the responsible one. And I was what? The irresponsible one? The freeloader? The failure? They were painting a portrait of me right there at the dinner table. It was a portrait of a woman who was lost, aimless, and leeching off her family's generosity. A daughter who had failed to launch. They spoke about me as if I wasn't in the room. Their words weaving a narrative that made their cruel decisions seem not only logical, but necessary. "You've been taking advantage of Mom and Dad for years," Julian continued, his voice gaining momentum. He was on a roll now, fueled by his own righteousness. "We've all been worried about you. You don't have a real job. You don't have a partner. You don't have a plan. We're doing this for your own good. 2. This will force you to finally grow up." I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was a strange feeling, like being in the eye of a hurricane. All around me, my world was being torn apart. But in the very center of my being, there was an unnatural stillness. I thought about all the years leading up to this moment. I remembered when Julian was accepted into his expensive MBA program. My parents threw a huge party. When I got a full scholarship for my online degree, my mother said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. At least you'll be home." I remembered when Julian got his first big promotion at the bank. My father took out an ad in the local paper. When I landed my first six-figure contract, I told them about it over the phone. And my father's only response was, "Is that stable work? Eleanor, it sounds risky." They had never seen me. They had never wanted to. They saw a version of me that fit their story, their expectations. The daughter who stayed behind. The quiet one who wouldn't make waves. The one who would always be there to dim her own light so that their sun could shine brighter. Inside, I felt the foundations of my love for them cracking. The hurt was a physical thing, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But on the outside, I kept my expression blank. I picked up my fork and pushed a piece of turkey around my plate. I met Julian's gaze across the table. He looked smug, confident that he had won. He thought this was the end of the conversation. He had no idea it was just the beginning. As they continued to talk, planning my exit from my own life, my mind drifted away from their voices. Their words became a meaningless buzz in the background. Instead, I thought about the secrets I held. Secrets that were wrapped up in the very floorboards and foundation of the house they were so eager to claim. Julian was lecturing me about financial responsibility. He talked about mortgages and property values, puffing out his chest like the banking expert he was. "You have no idea what it costs to run a place like this, Eleanor," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. I almost smiled. 3 years ago, a certified letter had arrived from the county tax office. It was a final notice. The property taxes were delinquent, and the house was at risk of being placed in a tax lien sale. I found the letter in the mail pile before my parents did. I saw the bold red letters, and my blood ran cold. That night, I sat in my room, the room they now saw as a guest bedroom for their future grandchildren, and I logged into the county's payment portal. I looked at the amount owed, $16,428. My father had just retired. His pension wasn't as much as he'd hoped. I knew they didn't have that kind of money just sitting around. So, I paid it. All of it. I used a separate bank account, one they knew nothing about. The next year, I paid it again. And the year after that, I had been paying the property taxes on this house for 36 months, and they were sitting here calling me a freeloader. Then my thoughts shifted to my father, who was currently explaining how Julian was better equipped to handle home maintenance. I looked at him, remembering the panic from 2 years ago. The heart attack. It had come out of nowhere on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The ambulance. The hospital. The terrifying hum of machines in the ICU. He survived. Thank God. But the bills that followed were staggering. Their insurance covered a fraction of it. I remembered sitting in the hospital cafeteria with my mother, who was crying into a styrofoam cup of coffee. "We'll lose everything. Eleanor," she whispered. "Your father would rather die than lose this house." So, I took care of it. I met with the hospital's billing department and arranged a payment plan. Every month, a substantial amount of money left my secret account and went directly to the hospital. When my parents asked how the bills were being managed, I lied. I told them a hospital charity for seniors had covered most of it. They believed me without question. It was easier for them to believe in the kindness of strangers than in the success of their own daughter. I secretly covered over $80,000 in medical debt to save my father's life and his pride. And he was sitting here telling me I wasn't responsible. But the biggest secret, the one that was coiled like a snake in my purse, was the most shocking of all. About a year and a half ago, during one of my late-night sessions monitoring my parents' finances from afar, something I did out of worry, not suspicion, I found it. A foreclosure notice from the bank. My father had taken out a second mortgage years ago to fund one of Julian's failed business ventures. Something they never told me about. He had been quietly struggling to make the payments. The bank was done waiting. The thought of them losing this house, their home of over 2 decades, was unbearable. This house was their identity. It was their pride. It was the only home I had ever really known. Losing it would have broken them completely. So, I acted. I didn't tell them. Their pride would have never allowed them to accept a handout from their failure of a daughter. Instead, I formed a holding company, a simple anonymous LLC. Through a lawyer, my company made the bank an offer, a full cash buyout to avoid the foreclosure auction. The bank, wanting to avoid the hassle, agreed immediately. I paid $865,000 in cash to buy this house. My house. The transaction was clean, quiet, and completely legal. They had been living in my home for 18 months, and they had no idea. They thought the bank had simply agreed to a long-term loan modification, another lie I had to invent to protect their fragile pride. I had been their silent savior, their ghost, their protector, and now they were casting me out into the street, not with malice, but with a casual, thoughtless cruelty that hurt more than any anger ever could. They saw me as a child, a burden. Little did they know, I was the only thing holding their entire world together. The discussion at the table had moved on to logistics. My family, my jury and executioners, were now debating the timeline of my eviction. She'll need until the end of the year at least, my mother said, a sliver of pity in her voice. It's only fair. Arthur. Julian scoffed. New Year's Day is a week away. That's more than enough time to pack up a bedroom. It's not like she has a whole house to move. He turned to me. You can have your stuff out by the 1st. Eleanor. We want to start painting the nursery in January. That seems fair. Right. Fair. The word echoed in the silent, screaming space inside my head. They were talking about fairness while orchestrating the most profound betrayal of my life. They were talking about paint colors for a nursery in a room I had paid for, in a house I owned, from which they were about to throw me out. That was it. That was the moment the calm stillness inside me solidified into something hard and unyielding. The hurt was still there, but now it was surrounded by a layer of cold, clear certainty. I was done being their secret. I was done being their victim. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my napkin on the table, I reached into my purse and took out my phone. The screen lit up my face in the dim dining room light. My father stopped talking. My mother watched me, a confused frown on her face. Julian rolled his eyes, probably assuming I was retreating into my phone to escape the conversation like a petulant teenager. I swiped through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name for just a second before I pressed it. The phone began to ring. I put it on speakerphone, the sound cutting through the thick, uncomfortable silence. A crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. Marcus Thorne. Marcus, it's Eleanor Vance, I said, my voice even and steady. Eleanor. Merry Christmas, he replied, his voice warm. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Merry Christmas to you too, Marcus. And you're not interrupting. I'm actually calling for a work matter. My family exchanged bewildered glances. Julian let out a short, mocking laugh. Work matter? Eleanor? Who is this? He whispered harshly. I ignored him. A work matter on Christmas night? Must be important, Marcus said. It is, I replied calmly. I have a situation at my property on Cedar Hollow. I need a team. A team for what? Is there a security breach? He asked, his tone shifting immediately to one of concern. No, nothing like that, I said, my eyes sweeping over the stunned faces of my family. I need a civilian escort. I have a few individuals here who need to be removed from the premises. The silence at the table was now absolute. Even Julian was speechless. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Understood. Are they aggressive? No, I said, my gaze finally landing on my brother. Not aggressive. Just mistaken about their right to be here. I need a two-man team. Low-key. Professional. They just need to stand by while I explain the situation. Consider it done. Eleanor. They can be there in 20 minutes. I'll send my best guys. Elias and Ben. Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it. Anytime. Send me the billable hours tomorrow. Talk to you then. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the polished wood of the dining room table. The click it made was the only sound in the room. I looked up and met the confused, shocked, and angry eyes of the three people who thought they held all the power. For the first time in my entire life, I was the one in control. And they were finally beginning to understand that. The immediate aftermath of the phone call was a tableau of disbelief. My father stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if he were trying to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the woman who had just ordered a security team to her own family dinner. My mother's face was pale, a mixture of fear and confusion. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. It was Julian. Of course. Who broke the silence? His face was red with anger and embarrassment. What the hell was that? He demanded, his voice a low growl. What kind of sick joke is this? Eleanor? You're calling security on your own family? Have you lost your mind? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply reached back into my purse. My movements calm and measured. My fingers found the folded stack of papers I always carried with me. My insurance policy, I thought. I pulled out the document and placed it gently on the center of the table, next to the half-empty bowl of cranberry sauce. What is that? My father asked, his voice raspy. It's the deed to this house, I said plainly. Julian laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. Oh, right. And I suppose you printed it off the internet this afternoon. Don't be ridiculous. Go ahead, I said, nodding at the document. Read it. My father hesitantly reached for the paper, his hands trembling slightly. He unfolded it. Julian and my mother leaned in, their eyes scanning the legal text. I knew the exact line they were looking for. The owner's name, Vance Ventures LLC. My father read aloud, his voice filled with confusion. What is this? That's my company, I explained. I formed it 18 months ago for the sole purpose of buying this property. The bank was foreclosing. Dad, you were about to lose everything, so I bought it. I let the words hang in the air. I told them the price. $865,000. I paid in cash. Julian snatched the deed from my father's hand. He stared at it, his eyes wide with frantic denial. This is fake. He spat. It has to be. You're lying. You work from your bedroom. Eleanor. You don't have 80,000, let alone 800,000. Where would you get that kind of money? This was the question I had been waiting for. The moment where the fantasy they had built around me would finally come crashing down. This was the part they would never be able to understand because they had never bothered to ask. My cybersecurity consulting business, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. The little online course I did. It was a master's program from one of the top tech institutes in the country. I consult for government agencies, the Department of Defense. I consult for Fortune 500 companies, banks, energy firms, tech giants. I find the flaws in their security systems before their enemies do. They pay me to protect their most valuable data. Julian just shook his head, a condescending smirk returning to his face. He was trying to regain control. Oh, please. You're a hacker. That's not a real job. How much can you possibly make from that? 50 grand a year? 60? I looked him dead in the eye. I gave him no smile, no hint of triumph. I just gave him the truth. A truth so far beyond his comprehension that it would break his perception of the world. My company's revenue last year, I said, speaking each word with precision, was a little over $40 million. The number landed on the table with the force of a physical blow. The smirk vanished from Julian's face. Chloe gasped. My mother's hand went to her heart, and she sank back into her chair. My father just stared at the deed in his hand, then at me, then back at the deed. The gears were turning. The pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed were finally clicking into place. The paid-off medical bills, the property taxes that never seemed to be a problem, their inexplicably stable financial world. In that moment, they weren't looking at Eleanor, the quiet daughter. They weren't looking at the freeloader sister. They were looking at a stranger. A woman who had been living a secret life right under their roof. A life they had been too blind and too arrogant to ever see. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had undergone a tectonic reversal, and the aftershocks were just beginning. The number hung in the air. 40 million. It was a figure so far removed from the narrative they had constructed for me that their minds visibly struggled to process it. My mother, Margaret, was the first to stammer. Her voice a thin, reedy sound. 40 million? Eleanor. What are you talking about? Her eyes darted from me to the deed, then to Julian, as if she expected him to somehow explain away this impossible reality. My father, Arthur, looked utterly defeated. His face, usually so firm, was crumpled with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. He finally connected the dots. The mysterious hospital charity that had quietly made their medical debt disappear. The property taxes that had never become an issue. He remembered the stress, the fear, the certainty that they were going to lose everything, and he remembered how that fear had just evaporated. Now he knew why. His dependent daughter hadn't just been in the house. She had been the house. She had been their quiet savior, operating in the shadows they had chosen to ignore. The realization of his own blindness and his misjudgment was a heavy weight on his shoulders. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Julian, however, was in full denial. His face was blotchy red, a vein throbbing in his temple. He slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. This is a lie. It's all a lie. You think I'm stupid. Eleanor? You think I'm going to believe this made-up story? 40 million? You? You barely leave your room. You don't even have a secretary. This is some kind of elaborate prank, isn't it? He looked around wildly, as if expecting hidden cameras to pop out and reveal the joke. Where's the proof? Show me the proof. Eleanor. His voice was loud, demanding, full of desperation. He needed to believe I was still the same person he had dismissed for years. The idea that I could be this powerful, this successful, undermined his entire identity. He was the golden child, the successful son, the one who took care of things. If I was the one with the real power, then what did that make him? I calmly reached back into my purse. I pulled out my laptop. A sleek, minimalist device that looked like a toy compared to Julian's bulky work computer. I opened it and turned the screen towards them. It showed a secure login portal. I entered my credentials, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "Here's the proof, Julian," I said, my voice still steady. The screen lit up, displaying a series of financial dashboards and encrypted contract summaries. These are my active contracts. Government agencies, Department of Energy, Treasury, Defense. They're highly classified, so you won't recognize the project names. But the revenue figures are right there. Net profit margins for the last 3 quarters. I scrolled down. These are the invoices from Fortune 500 companies, each one for a 7-figure sum. Penetration testing, security architecture design, incident response. I clicked on a chart that showed revenue growth over the past 3 years. The line soared upwards like a rocket. This is the growth curve. My business has doubled every year since I started it. I scrolled further, revealing my business bank accounts, showing balances that would make anyone's head spin. And this is the liquid capital. More than enough to buy this house outright and then some. Julian leaned in, his eyes darting frantically over the figures. He was a banker. He understood numbers. The data on the screen was undeniable. He saw the official government logos, the corporate letterheads, the legitimate financial statements. His jaw went slack. The fight slowly drained from his face, replaced by a dawning horror. Chloe, who had been silently watching, her face white, whispered, "Julian." Her voice was barely audible. My mother made a small, choked sound. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the festive Christmas decorations, as if searching for a way to reconcile these 2 impossible realities. Her daughter, the quiet one, the one she worried about, was a multi-millionaire cybersecurity mogul, and they had just tried to throw her out of the house she owned. The cognitive dissonance was almost painful to witness. My father slowly pushed the deed back across the table towards me. He didn't say a word, but his eyes conveyed a silent, profound apology mixed with a deep sense of shame. His illusions about me, about his family, about his own understanding of his world were not just shattered, they were pulverized. And there was no putting them back together. The truth, stark and undeniable, was laid bare on a Christmas dinner table. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video to help me grow, so I can continue bringing you stories like this. Just as the stunned silence reached its breaking point, a faint ring echoed from the doorbell. It was a polite, almost gentle sound, incongruous with the storm brewing in the dining room. But to my ears, it was the sound of a closing chapter. I closed my laptop and slid it back into my purse. "That will be them," I stated, my voice cutting through the thick tension. My family flinched. Julian's head snapped towards the door, then back to me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and rage. You really called security? You're going to do this?" "Eleanor." "To us?" His voice was hoarse, laced with disbelief. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The scraping sound it made on the hardwood floor was loud. I walked calmly towards the front door. I could feel their eyes on my back. A mixture of disbelief and frantic hope that this was still some elaborate bluff. I opened the door. Standing on my porch were two men, Elias and Ben. They were both tall, impeccably dressed in dark suits, and exuded an aura of quiet competence. They were the best Marcus had, and it showed. They didn't look like bouncers. They looked like corporate executives, but their eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Eleanor," Elias said, his voice deep and respectful. "Good evening." "Elias." "Ben. Thank you for coming. Please, come in." I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. They took 2 steps into the entryway and stopped, their presence instantly changing the atmosphere of the house. They didn't speak, didn't make any sudden movements, but their calm, authoritative posture radiated an unspoken message. They were here, and they were in charge. My family stared at them, their faces a mixture of horror and realization. The reality of the situation, the undeniable truth of the men standing in their entryway, began to sink in. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a bluff. This was real. Julian, in a last desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, tried to puff himself up. He stood from the table, his chest out, trying to project an air of indignant authority. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, directing his question to Elias, clearly trying to bypass me. "You can't just walk into a private residence." Before he could finish, Chloe grabbed his arm, her grip tight. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with genuine panic. "Julian, stop it," she hissed, pulling him back. She understood the gravity of the situation in a way he still seemed unwilling to. She saw the men, the suits, the calm resolve in my posture. She saw the numbers on my laptop screen. She saw the deed. I stepped forward, putting myself between Julian and the security team. "Gentlemen, this is my brother Julian, my sister-in-law Chloe, and my parents Arthur and Margaret." I spoke their names without warmth, just a simple identification. Then I turned my attention fully to my family. As I've explained, this property legally belongs to Vance Ventures LLC, which is my company. I have requested their presence to ensure a smooth transition. My voice remained even, devoid of any anger, which somehow made it even more impactful. It was the voice of a CEO, not a wronged daughter. Julian sputtered, his earlier bluster dissolving into a pathetic whine. "Transition, Eleanor? This is our home. You can't just kick us out on Christmas." I looked directly at him, then at my parents, who were now watching me with pleading eyes. "You were about to throw me out by New Year's Day. You just told me to pack my bags because this house isn't mine anymore. You painted me as a failure, a burden, and a drain on your resources. You made your decision. Now, I'm making mine. I paused, allowing my words to sink in, allowing them to feel the full weight of their own cruelty reflected back at them. You have until tomorrow evening, December 26th, to move your personal belongings out of this house. The furniture stays. All of it. Anything that isn't personal clothes. Toiletries. Family photos remains here. Elias and Ben will be available to oversee the process and ensure everything goes smoothly. I looked at the two security men, who nodded in silent agreement. They will return tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. To begin. My words were a hammer blow. My mother started to weep softly. My father looked utterly broken. His head bowed. Julian stared at me, his face contorted in a silent scream of disbelief and humiliation. He had wanted me gone, wanted me to pack my bags. And now, the same order, far more devastating, was being issued to him. The dining room became a tomb. My mother's soft whimpers were the only sound, quickly stifled by my father's hand on her arm. The security men stood silent, unobtrusive, but undeniably present. Their mere existence was a testament to the new reality. My father, Arthur, finally lifted his head. His eyes, usually full of quiet authority, were now just pools of despair. This is ridiculous. Eleanor, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. You can't be serious. This is your family. The words held no weight. His earlier declaration that the house wasn't mine anymore echoed hollowly in the air. My mother, Margaret, wiped her eyes and looked at me, a desperate plea in her gaze. Please. Honey, it's Christmas. Can't we just talk about this? We made a mistake. We know that now. Please don't do this. I met her gaze, but my heart, though aching, remained firm. The calm inside me had solidified into a protective shell. We did talk about it. Mom, for years. You just never listened. You judged me by what you wanted to see, not by who I actually was. And tonight, you decided I was expendable. That my home, the place I thought was safe, was not mine. I walked back to the head of the table, picking up the deed. You were about to throw me out by New Year's. You gave me a week. Now you're leaving. That's my decision. My terms. My voice held no malice, only an unwavering resolve. It was simply a statement of fact, a consequence of their own actions. Julian, who had been frozen in place, finally moved. The humiliation was a palpable thing, radiating off him in waves. He looked at me, then at Chloe, who was now quietly sobbing. He saw the cold, professional faces of the security men. He saw his parents' defeated expressions. All his bluster was gone. He was just a man facing an impossible reality. Fine. He choked out, the word barely audible. He turned and stormed out of the dining room, Chloe scrambling to follow him. We could hear their hurried footsteps on the stairs. Then the frantic opening and closing of closet doors in what had been his childhood bedroom. The sound of their lives being packed into boxes. My parents remained seated, watching me. Their expressions a mix of shame, regret, and a dawning understanding of just how profoundly they had underestimated me. They saw me for the first time, not as their quiet, overlooked daughter, but as the powerful, independent woman I had become. And they realized with a crushing finality that they had squandered their chance to share in that success. To truly know me, Elias and Ben remained in the entryway, silent sentinels. I looked at my parents. "I'm going to my room," I told them, my voice softening slightly. But the boundary remained. The security will be here to ensure everyone leaves peacefully. I walked away from the shattered remnants of our Christmas dinner, leaving them to their humiliation. As I walked down the hall, I heard the sounds from upstairs intensifying, frantic rustling, hurried footsteps. That night, Julian and Chloe packed in shame. The quiet colonial home, once filled with the warmth of tradition, was now a hollow echo of broken trust. The weight of their betrayal, once crushing, had been lifted, replaced by the quiet, heavy burden of their own choices. The next morning, the house was quieter than it had been in years. The air still carried the faint scent of pine and leftover turkey, but the oppressive weight of unspoken expectations and casual dismissals was gone. Elias and Ben had arrived promptly at 9 o'clock. They oversaw the departure of Julian and Chloe, a process filled with tense silence and averted eyes. Julian tried to argue about a few pieces of furniture, but the security guards calmly reminded him of my explicit instructions. Chloe, looking utterly defeated, just pulled him away. By noon, their cars were gone, leaving only tire tracks in the thin layer of Christmas snow. My parents left shortly after, their departure even more subdued. They didn't argue. They just packed a few small bags, their movements slow and heavy. My mother tried to hug me, but I stepped back, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional one. "I need time." "Mom!" I had said, my voice gentle but firm. "A lot of time." My father just nodded, his gaze distant. Once they were gone, the silence was profound. I walked through my home. Not their home, my home. The living room where generations of Vances had celebrated holidays. The kitchen where my mother had taught me to bake. The dining room where they had tried to cast me out. Every room held a memory. But now those memories were stripped of their power to hurt. The ghosts of past slights and overlooked achievements no longer haunted the hallways. I walked into my own bedroom, the one they saw as the guest room for future grandchildren. I sat on my bed, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt a deep, profound sense of relief. It wasn't the relief of victory, but the quiet peace of finally being seen, even if it had come at such a high cost. It was the relief of reclaiming my own space. my own identity, from the narratives they had imposed on me. I realized how much emotional energy I had spent subconsciously trying to shrink myself to fit their expectations, to be the person they wanted me to be rather than the person I actually was. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I hesitated, then answered. Eleanor. Her voice was soft, fragile. I'm here, Mom. Are you Tao? Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom, I replied, my voice calm. There was a long pause. Then she spoke again, her voice thick with unshed tears. We were wrong, honey. So wrong. I don't even know what to say. We've been talking. Your father and I, he's devastated. We just didn't see you. We really didn't. The admission, raw and honest, was like a small crack in the wall I had built. No, you didn't, I confirmed. You saw what you wanted to see? The version of me that was convenient. The one who wouldn't challenge Julian. The one who would always just be there. We were stuck, Eleanor, she confessed, her voice filled with regret. Stuck in how we thought things should be. Julian was the successful one, the one with the family plan. And you were so quiet. We just assumed. We made so many assumptions. She paused, taking a shaky breath. We ignored you. We dismissed you. We even looked down on you. And all this time, you were the one holding us up. You saved us. The truth in her words was startling. It wasn't an apology for what they had done, but an admission of their blindness. It was a start. I know, I said, and it hurt more than you'll ever know. I'm so sorry. Eleanor. I truly am. We both are. I closed my eyes. The apology felt genuine. Finally. But genuine didn't mean immediate forgiveness. It meant a path to healing. A path that would be long and arduous. I appreciate you saying that, Mom, I told her. But things can't go back to how they were. Not ever. I understand, she whispered. What? What happens now? Now we rebuild, I stated. But it will be on my terms. Not on your assumptions. If you want to be a part of my life, if you want to live in this house again, it will be with respect, with honesty, and with an understanding that I am not the little girl you thought I was. I'm not a dependent. I'm an adult, a successful one, and I deserve to be treated that way. There was another silence. This one different. It wasn't a silence of defiance, but of acceptance. We can do that, Eleanor, she said, her voice stronger now with a hint of hope. We will. Please, Just give us a chance. I didn't answer immediately. I needed to feel this new power. This new reality truly settle within me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about defining my own worth on my own terms. "We'll see, Mom," I finally said. "One step at a time." The call ended, leaving me in the quiet of my home, finally at peace with the powerful woman I had become. The months that followed were a journey of rebuilding, not just of family relationships, but of my own sense of self within that family. It wasn't quick, and it certainly wasn't easy. The raw wounds of betrayal don't heal overnight. My parents, Arthur and Margaret, lived in a small rental apartment for a while. They called often, tentatively at first. Then, with increasing frequency, their conversations were different. They asked about my work, not with the old dismissive tone, but with genuine curiosity. They listened when I spoke. My mother even started sending me articles about cybersecurity, trying to understand my world. My father, in his quiet way, would sometimes just say, "I'm proud of you, Eleanor." Those words, once so desperately longed for, now felt earned, not given out of obligation. After several months, I made them an offer. They could return to the house, but as tenants. They would pay a fair market rent not as a punishment, but as a practical measure and a clear boundary. They agreed without hesitation. It was a symbolic shift, establishing a new foundation of mutual respect and clear expectations. They moved back into the home that was now legally mine, but they did so with a new understanding of whose generosity they were living under. Julian and Chloe, on the other hand, chose a different path. The shock and humiliation of that Christmas dinner had been too much for Julian to overcome quickly. He tried to discredit me to other family members, spinning tales of my ruthless ambition and lack of family loyalty. But the truth of my success and their prior neglect was too widely known. Slowly, he faded from the immediate family circle. He and Chloe bought a smaller home in a different town, a far cry from the grand dreams he'd had for my house. Our relationship became distant, a polite but hollow exchange of Christmas cards, a quiet acknowledgement of a bridge that had been burned. My parents and I eventually started family therapy, something I never imagined we would do. It was awkward at first, dredging up years of resentment and unacknowledged pain. But it was necessary. In those sessions, my parents finally articulated their own insecurities, their fears, their ingrained patterns of favoritism that had unknowingly stifled me. I, in turn, expressed the profound loneliness and hurt I had carried for so long. It wasn't about blaming. It was about understanding. It was about finding a way to communicate, not as parent and child in the old dynamic, but as three adults trying to navigate a complicated history. Slowly, carefully, wounds began to heal. The therapy helped us establish new ways of interacting, ways that valued my voice, my achievements, and my boundaries. My relationship with my parents is not perfect, but it is real. It is built on honesty and respect, not on the fragile illusions of the past. Every Christmas since, I host dinner in my home on Cedar Hollow. The table is still beautifully set. The turkey is still roasted. And the pine tree still fills the living room with its scent. But now, when Julian and Chloe, who sometimes attend, though the tension is always palpable, or other relatives raise a glass, there's no grandstanding. There's no dismissal. There's a quiet acknowledgement of the journey we've all been on. And as I look around the table at the faces of my family, I remember that Christmas dinner, the moment my world shattered. But it was also the moment I found my voice, my power, and ultimately, my peace. The house isn't just a building. It's a reminder. A reminder that respect is the true foundation of family. And that sometimes, the quietest person at the table holds all the power.